Okay, welcome back to another workshop of expert conversations. Today's topic is how to organize your Voiceflow canvas as a conversation designer. And I'm very excited to have Y, a conversation designer. Y, thanks for hopping on and covering this topic with us.
Thank you, Sam. Good afternoon.
And good afternoon. Yeah. So can you give us a little bit of background on yourself as a conversation designer and maybe the team that you're working on today?
So I started working as a conversational designer probably around 4 years ago. And then back then we didn't have any such kind of tools that we're using right now with great capabilities. And eventually we started building it out in Lucid charts and all that stuff. And now we have Voiceflow. Our team consists of product managers, AI engineers, and QA folks. But the conversation design part there's only one person, that's me doing it right now. So I have the entire freedom to take care of the canvas.
And on that topic about the canvas, no matter if it's just one conversation designer like yourself or 40, you're always going to be working with other teams and other roles. So that makes the canvas organization pretty important. So let's hop into the topic before we hop into the canvas and you show us a project that you built out. So let's start with some foundational kind of like workflow questions. You teased it a little bit, but how many people are collaborating on a given project? I know you are the one designer, but outside of yourself, whether it's developers, stakeholders, AI trainers, how many other people do you think maybe look at a Voiceflow project or canvas in a given sprint?
In a given sprint, it will probably be around 3 to 4 people. It may depend on people from my team or other teams, other conversation designers from other chat or voice bot teams. But the idea is to have it streamlined so that we know that there's a standardized way to do that in order to make sure everything is more streamlined. And the organization plays a pretty important part when you're trying to have teams working together in Voiceflow.
We saw a few projects you were working on as your team started to ramp up. Why do you specifically like to organize your canvas? Why do you pay such attention to detail about how you organize?
I feel like canvas organization is the key part for any conversation design process. So, for example, if you have a messy canvas, it's really hard for people who are looking out from the outside to navigate and understand what's happening exactly in the customer journey, right? So if you have an organized canvas, letting people either that are working in your team or people, external stakeholders, understand exactly what's going on, they will have better insight and better understandability of what the chatbot is actually trying to do in a different scenario. The easier it is to understand, the better insight you will have as to what you're trying to accomplish.
I know you talked about using more static flowcharting tools in the past, and a lot of the work then is scattered across different tools and different files, which makes it pretty hard to standardize design systems for your team. So why don't we hop in the canvas and take a look?
Yeah, share my screen. So here we have a simple chatbot that is related to a car company, in car insurance company, where we tackle our customer problems. Since this is a sample project, one of the things we are tackling here is how to make a payment or how to do an insurance claim or how to set up my online account or what kind of payment details are required. So that's what we have right here. And then we have different components and topics which are easily accessible from anywhere in the user journey.
Amazing. Okay, great. So that's kind of like the overview of what this assistant is trying to accomplish, help
Yes.
help a car company or help a user of a car company navigate. So let's do a sample, walk us through a sample flow. Let's say someone wanted to make a payment, right? That's that user persona. Can you click in and show us maybe the potential paths that person might take?
Yeah, so if I go, so each intent is linked to a component or a subflow. So if I go into the payment flow, right? So here we have, if somebody were to say, I need to make a payment via credit card, we only have a sub intent in the intent itself, and it can be triggered from outside the flow or inside the flow. So if they were to say, pay with my credit card, we have the verbiage that we provide. But for example, if I were to just say, I just need to make a payment and I didn't specify what type of method I want to use to make the payment, we offer a probing question asking them, here are a couple of ways you can make a payment, and then they can click on these actions to go there. So if I were to run this for you, so we have the welcome message, and then here we have a menu style approach where we are providing them with some of the things they can do, but not necessarily all the things. So
Yeah.
if I click on make a payment here, it's going to go into the flow and ask me what type of, I need to use a credit card or a debit card, whatever it may be. So if I click a debit card, and then it's going to take me to that part where I can see how I can use my debit card to pay my car insurance or car payments of sorts.
Got it. So that would be that first flow from like a payment perspective. Let's hop back to the home topic here, and let's do one more just to really understand the experience. For example, do you have another one that you prefer to show, whether it's insurance claim or setup?
Yes. So one of the other thing I would like to show is, so for example, if I want to reset my password, I click that and it should go to the password reset. It'll tell me, okay, I need to log in, and then click on I forgot my password. But now I am done with this request. So I need to go to another request, which would be payment details. So if I place that, so I finished my password reset. So I have that answered, and I know what to do about password reset. Now imagine I have already resetted my password, and I need to know what my payment details is. So I say make payment. So now I tell them, okay, I need to make a payment. It's going to ask me, I need to pay online. The ways I can make a payment online, and I'm done with that. And then I would say, what's my due date? So since finding out a due date would require the customer to be authenticated, so we'll start by asking them what their zip code is. So for example, I type a zip code. It's going to look that up, repeat that, and see if that's the accurate zip code I provided. So if I say yes, then it's going to go through the date of birth. So for example, I say it's 9/21.
Nice.
So I'll say yes, and come out, and then it'll tell me my next payment is coming up on the date for the dollar amount. And then I'm done with this conversation.
So you showed us content. Let's talk about how you approached organization specifically. You talked about components a bit. And there's a few on this main page that maybe I'd love for you to talk about your strategy, but there's also this agent transfer component that's used various times. We saw it as you went through many of the flows. So can you talk about maybe first these components like make a payment, forgot password, and then hit on why you structured the agent transfer the way you did?
Yes, definitely. Design can be different from each designer, right? So what I did was I made sure every intent is attached to a component. So eventually when the user triggers that intent, he's going to go into the component. And the component might have different sub-components in it. For example, if I go to forgot password, so that this in itself is a component. And once he's done with it, and for example, he types something that is not being trained in the bot, after a couple of tries, he gets frustrated. So that's not a good customer experience. So we want him to go to an agent where he can actually service his queries. So this agent, that's where this reusable components which we are using here comes in handy, because if you go into the agent transfer flow, there's a bunch of stuff that is happening here. So we don't want to recreate all of the blocks or logics for every time we have to send them to an agent. So what we can do is we can house all of that logic in a separate component which can be reused anywhere. So for here in this flow, I have agent transfer like almost everywhere when they exceed the number of tries. So instead of creating that logic every time, every component or flow, I can reuse that flow wherever I require. So that's the good advantage of components. So they can be reused whenever and wherever you like, depending on your needs.
Absolutely. And I think something to call out as you look at the bottom left there about the list of components, many of those are repeatable, right? Like things that should be able to be accessed and repeated at various points in the conversation. And as you said, you want to be able to use agent transfer with all that logic From a design perspective and an organization perspective, if a stakeholder came in and saw all of the logic behind agent transfer, they might be overwhelmed, or they might tune out from the design versus understanding all that logic's in there. You can click in and I'm going to use it, that same repeatable option throughout, which is powerful.
Yes, so this is like in coding, you have method blocks where you can reuse them. Similarly, components act like that, where you can reuse code or logic in your conversation design journey.
That's great. Again, in a live production capacity, if you were working with a developer to, let's say, build an API call to make that agent transfer possible, you wouldn't want to have them rebuild it 700 times. You'd say, let's build it once and then let me use it 700 times throughout.
Yes.
And then when you actually do handoff or push to production directly from Voiceflow, it's a lot easier to have that logic in the code already built.
Yes, that's the good part about components. So you can reuse them as you like, whenever you like, however you like.
Let's now switch to another part that you used here from an organization perspective, which is actions. Specifically, just to point out for anyone watching and learning, actions would be the offshoots of that main menu.
Yes. So each one is linked to an intent, right? So for example, if I look at make a payment, the action for this is to go to make a payment in intent. So there are a couple of actions you can use in Voiceflow. So one of them would be to set up a variable where you can set variable, like this user is a returning user, or somebody asks you to make a payment, you can send them to a link or URL where they can open that and do it. You can integrate with your APIs or code. But in this instance, what I did was I used this make a payment to go to make a payment intent. For example, if the user clicks this button, he would directly go to the actions, make the canvas more clear and concise to understand, as well as reducing all the clutter that comes with the lines and dragging and dropping.
Absolutely. I think, yeah, reducing clutter is that benefit for a designer, especially as you add more designers to your team. Everyone should be able to know exactly what this intent or button or step does and not need to follow a snaking line to every block to get there. Topics. So on the left-hand side there, above components, you have the various topics, and you structured yours with a home topic, but then also agent transfer and payment. And topics are very flexible, and every designer goes about it a little bit differently. Can you give your approach of how you use topics for this car company?
Yeah, definitely. So ideally, topics are like reusable components which can be triggered anywhere in the flow, right? So for example, if I go to the payment flow and I click on this intent, it says it's available from other topics, which means if a user in the subflow and he can trigger this in a different subflow, he can trigger this which is housed over here as a payment topic. So he can trigger it from anywhere in the user journey. And also topics make it easy for you to understand what kind of use cases you have in your project. As the project gets bigger and bigger, you ideally would not want to have all these intents housed in the home topic. Rather, you want to separate them out into different subtopics, which will help you organizing your canvas in a better way. So
rolling intents up into topics is a smart idea as it becomes more complex. But you could still use the actions that you have on that welcome block to send people down a different topic. It would just be, again, folderized and a little bit easier organization. Again, not needed for this project just yet, but in a full-scale team project, it's very helpful.
Yeah, definitely.
I think a lot of times when we talk to conversation designers and design teams, it's not building from scratch always, right? There's an existing assistant in production. You have a version control that say this one's in production. We pushed it to Dialogflow, for example, right? But then the data science team says, hey, we need a new intent added or a new flow because people keep asking for find my keys or unlock my car, for example. How would you go about adding a new flow or a new intent to an existing project like this from an organization perspective?
Yeah, it would depend on what the use case is we are actually trying to solve, right? If it is a smaller use case, for example, I forgot my keys, and you have already component called help, where you have different various kinds of help you're providing the customer. You can actually add an entity to that subflow. But for other instances, right, if somebody were to say, I need to pay my account with the debit card, can you take my account number and my credit card number? They require a lot of design. So in that case, you would probably be better off creating a new intent or to capture that use case in itself. So it depends on how big or small the use case you're trying to solve it.
Because your canvas is already organized and has a hierarchy of structure, you're able to understand based on the user insight and what needs to be built, you can understand where it needs to plug in, whether it's a component, a topic, or just an entity on an intent. Because you've already structured it well, now it's very clear to understand where it plugs in versus having no structure and just say, I'm going to build another intent. I'm going to add another menu item.
To create new intents for every use case, some of the intents might have similar training data. So it would be really hard for the NLE to pick up on what the actual user intent is, right?
Yep.
So if you already have them housed in, like, club them in like a file or folder format, it would and divide them based on entity.
So that,
Yes.
again, to your point, it allows you to really drill down and folderize not only the NLU model, but also the content that you're serving up based on the context of the user. The last thing I want to call out, which is a new feature, and I know that you've started to experiment with a little bit, is domains.
Yes.
Right? Before we show how it might look, I think, for example, you design this, let's say, with chat assistant perspective, right? That main menu has clickable buttons. And let's say this is your car company's chat assistant on the website, right?
Yeah.
As a team, and especially as a conversation design team, you might say, oh, I'm also in charge of the IVR. The challenge there is that oftentimes people might create different projects with separate NLU data, separate components, but oftentimes the same components, the same NLU data is, and even intent and topics are usable or at least not repeatable across different assistants, depending on the channel. And I think that's what domains has helped people do, is instead of creating a new project for every mode or every assistant home, you can go up where the home toggle is up on the top and actually drop down and create a new domain. So we would call this, for example, the chat domain. The other one would be the IVR domain. And being able to then use the same NLU data across the entire brand assistant suite, and even use that agent transfer, who you want to be able to do an agent transfer regardless. You could actually reuse that, maybe make a few changes, but reuse that across different domains then. Yeah,
I think domains is really useful because everybody is nowadays trying to create that omni-channel experience from chat to voice. So now Voiceflow is able to bring that omni-channel experience to the design process itself. So it can start from scratch. The omni-channel process will start from scratch. So you can understand how the user journey is just in the design process itself before you take it to production.
It enables designers to think and design with an omni-channel approach. That's spot on. Can you go through how you approach which colors for which blocks here?
Yeah, I try to keep the colors as minimal as possible. And so I use blue here just for all the intents that are being used in this project. And then the orange is for when somebody has to go out of the project and it's going to a CRM portal or something like that. And then the green is the project itself starts. So this is where a user would start interacting with the bot. So I just put a different color coding for that. As you can see, there are only 3 different colors. Obviously, you can have as many colors as you want, but to keep it concise and simple, I just use 3 colors.
If and when you bring on another designer or you're communicating with a developer, you can make it very clear, like this is the key, the visual key based on the colors here, and makes it pretty understood which is which.
So they can know, like, the blue are the intents and the green is the welcome menu and the orange is the transfer. You can also actually color your lines so you know what's happening. So a red line is something unhappy path, or like a blue line is a happy path. So you can color code that as well to make it more understandable.
The main things that I took out of this for someone, let's say, starting from scratch from like a Canvas org perspective, is leveraging colors, labeling and understanding lines, thinking with like a hierarchy between topics, components, domains?
I think depending on your project size, you should probably start out with housing everything possible into topics. You can have them as home topics or separate topics depending on your need, but having an intent and a flows attached to that would make it more reusable in the long run as well. And then the components should probably try to house most of the stuff that is mostly reused more than some, say, for example, 10 or 20 times in your conversation design into components, so you can easily plug them wherever you need. And also, labeling the lines and coloring the blocks is a good way to start. And also understanding how components and flows stack up on each other.
Awesome. I think that gave people a lot to consider in terms of Canvas organization.
You can use this as a template if they choose to and start off from there.
Wyatt, thank you so much for taking some time to show us how you organize your Canvas and how others can think about it, whether they're doing it from scratch or even going through the process of reorganizing what they already have. I think this will help teams work a little bit more collaboratively, not only amongst designers, but then with other teams too.
Yeah, definitely, Sam. Thank you for your time.